You ever sit in a room full of people who are supposed to love you and realize you're completely invisible to them? Like your background noise at your own family gathering? That was me, 2 weeks before Christmas, sitting at a long mahogany table under the warm golden light of a chandelier I couldn't afford if I sold both kidneys. My name's Owen, I'm 29, and I was invited to my family's fancy holiday dinner at this overpriced restaurant in downtown Chicago. The kind of place with linen napkins folded like origami and waiters who whisper like you're all attending a funeral. The kind of place where appearances matter more than honesty. I wasn't expecting much. My family doesn't really do warmth. They do performance. And I've learned over the years that if I keep my expectations low, I won't be disappointed. But even I wasn't prepared for how that night would unfold. Growing up, I always felt like the extra piece at the puzzle table, the one that doesn't fit the picture. My parents had my older brother, Zach, when they were just out of college, and he's always been the golden boy. Varsity athlete, Ivy League grad, married the homecoming queen, Claire, who now owns a wedding planning business and talks like every conversation is a client meeting. I came along 8 years later, what my mom called her oops baby, and my dad jokingly referred to as the surprise tax deduction. They said it with smiles, but it stuck with me. Zach never had to try for their approval. I could cure cancer, and my mom would still remind me to tuck in my shirt. So when my family extended the dinner invite, I was suspicious but not surprised. They do this thing where they include me just enough to say they did, but never enough to make me feel like I belong. Like last year's Thanksgiving, when they all coordinated matching sweaters for a group photo, except no one told me. I showed up in a black hoodie, stuck out like a bruise, and Mom made a passive-aggressive comment about how I never really grew out of that emo phase, huh? I smiled through it. I always smile through it. But this time was different. This time I wasn't just going to eat their fancy dinner, fake some laughs, and slip out early. I had something in my back pocket, something that Zach would never see coming. See, what my perfect big brother didn't know was that a few weeks ago, Claire, his polished, camera-ready wife, called me crying. Full-on meltdown. Turns out she found some texts on Zach's iPad. And they weren't work messages. They were from someone named Madison. And they were graphic. Not the, oops, I sent that to the wrong number kind. The kind you can't explain away, not even with a team of lawyers. Claire was hysterical. She needed someone to talk to, and for whatever reason, she picked me. Maybe because I was the only one in the family who didn't worship Zach like he walked on Lake Michigan. Maybe because I always treated her like a real person, not just Zach's trophy wife. Either way, she told me everything. And I listened. At first, I didn't know what to do with it. Part of me thought it wasn't my place. That if Claire wanted to confront him, she would. But as the days went by, I kept thinking about all the times Zach had talked down to me, laughed at me in front of our parents, treated me like some broken side character in his flawless movie. And now here he was, living this double life, breaking the heart of the woman who trusted him most, and still sitting at the head of every family dinner like a king. It made my stomach turn. So when the invite came for this year's Christmas dinner, something inside me shifted. I wasn't going to cause a scene. I wasn't going to throw a fit. But I also wasn't going to keep pretending. I accepted the invite with a smiley face emoji. Zach responded with a thumbs up, followed by, "We're something nice this time. LOL. Classic. I left him on read. The restaurant was decked out in tasteful holiday decor. Pine garlands, little crystal snowflakes hanging from the ceiling, a live jazz trio playing soft renditions of Christmas classics. My parents had reserved a private room, of course. There were 12 of us. Mom, Dad, Zach and Claire, Claire's parents, my Aunt Denise, my cousin Riley, and a few of Zach's college friends who always conveniently show up at these things. I was the last to arrive, and as soon as I walked in, I felt the temperature drop. Not literally. It was roasting in there, but socially. My mom gave me a quick once-over and said, "Oh, you wore jeans." I smiled and kissed her cheek. "Good to see you too, Mom." The night went as expected. Polite conversation, clinking glasses, fake laughter. The waiter came around for orders, and I noticed he skipped me. I figured he'd come back. But when the food arrived, plates of steak, sea bass, seasonal risotto, mine never showed up. I waited and waited. Everyone else dug in. My dad didn't even look up from his plate. Zach made some offhand joke about the kitchen forgetting the spare, and my mom chuckled a little too hard. Claire looked uncomfortable, but didn't say anything. I tried to wave down a waiter, but they were busy pouring wine for the rest of the table. No one else seemed to notice or care. I should have said something, but I didn't. I sat there, hands folded in my lap, watching everyone eat like I wasn't even there. I felt 16 again, sitting at the kids' table during Easter, listening to Zach get praised for a B+, while my straight A report card went ignored. I felt the old bitterness rise in my throat, but I swallowed it. Not yet, I told myself. Almost. Then the jazz trio took a break, and one of the singers, a cheerful woman in a red dress, walked into our private room with a mic. "We're inviting guests to share some holiday cheer," she said with a smile. "Say a few words, a toast, a memory. Anyone." She scanned the room. Zach waved her off. "We're good," he said. But the woman turned to me. Maybe she saw something in my eyes. Or maybe fate just has a wicked sense of humor. "How about you?" she asked. "Would you like to say something?" And that's when I stood up. I didn't even know I was standing until I saw everyone's heads turn. The room hushed, like someone had turned down the volume on a loud party right before a fight breaks out. My palms were sweating, and my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it behind my ears. But I forced a smile. One of those tight, polite ones you practice in the mirror when you know you're about to say something that'll burn the place down. The singer handed me the mic and gave me an encouraging nod, stepping back as if she already knew this was going to be something. I cleared my throat and looked around the room. Everyone was staring. My mom with her forced, camera smile. My dad, irritated at the interruption of his wine pairing. Zach, smirking like he couldn't wait to hear me fumble through a lame holiday toast. Claire looked frozen. She had barely touched her meal. I started slow. "Oh yeah? Thanks." I wasn't expecting to speak, but I guess since I haven't been eating, I've had time to think. That got a few chuckles. Mostly polite. Mostly confused. My mom tilted her head, her smile faltering just a bit. My dad looked mildly annoyed, like I was dragging this out. I didn't care. I kept going. "I just want to thank everyone for being here. It's nice to be invited." I let that hang. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Zach was now leaning back in his chair, arms crossed, wearing the face he always used when I started talking too much at family events. Like he was waiting for me to embarrass myself so he could swoop in and rescue the room with a joke. But I wasn't joking. "I've always admired how close this family is," I said, slowly pacing the narrow space behind the chairs. "The way we support each other, celebrate each other, share everything, right?" That's when Zach's eyes narrowed. Claire looked down at her lap. My mom gave a nervous laugh. "Well, of course, sweetie," she said too quickly. "You know how much we love family time." I nodded. "Right? Family time. Like Thanksgiving, when we all wore those matching sweaters." A pause. "Well, not all of us." Riley let out an involuntary snort. Aunt Denise shot her a look. My mom's face flushed. "You didn't tell us if you were coming, Owen," she said, trying to keep her tone level. "We didn't think to." "You texted me the time and location," I said calmly. "You just didn't mention the sweaters." Dead silence. My dad cleared his throat. "All right, Owen, maybe we should. Maybe we should talk about Madison," I said. And just like that, the entire room stopped breathing. Zach's smirk dropped off his face like a brick. Claire flinched, her fingers tightening around her wine glass. My mom blinked like she'd just been slapped. My dad froze mid-sip. I turned toward my brother and looked him dead in the eyes. "She found the texts," I said. "Claire knows." No one moved. No one spoke. It was like a freeze frame in a movie, the exact moment before the explosion. Claire's lower lip trembled. Zach opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, but nothing came out. I held the mic loosely, my hand shaking just a bit now, but I didn't stop. "Merry Christmas," I said quietly, and handed the mic back to the stunned singer. I sat down. No one else said a word. Claire slowly put her glass down, stood up, and walked out of the room. Not a word. Just a slow, deliberate exit. Zach didn't follow. He just sat there, staring at the table, like he didn't recognize any of the silverware anymore. I thought that was going to be the climax. The big, dramatic moment. The thing they'd remember for years. But I was wrong. That was just the fuse. The explosion came after. When I got home later that night, my phone was already blowing up. Missed calls from my mom. 3 texts from Dad. That was completely inappropriate. "You humiliated your brother. Call me." And Zach? Nothing. Radio silence. Claire texted me too. Just one message. "Thank you." I went to bed with a strange mix of adrenaline and guilt, like I'd finally done something brave, but couldn't stop second-guessing it. Was it my place to say anything? Did I just blow up a marriage? Did I want to? The next morning, I found out Zach had called an emergency family meeting, which, in my house, means brunch at our parents' house with just the inner circle, mom, dad, Zach, and me. Claire wasn't invited. Of course not. She was already the outsider again. I showed up to find my parents sitting stiffly at the dining table, still in their Sunday clothes, like they'd just returned from church. My mom's eyes were red and puffy, and my dad looked like he hadn't slept. Zach stood by the window, arms crossed, jaw clenched. "Sit," my dad said, not looking at me. I sat. No one spoke for a full minute. Then my mom finally broke the silence. "Why would you do that, Owen?" "Do what?" I said, knowing exactly what she meant. "Humiliate your brother. In front of everyone. On Christmas." I blinked. "Are we really starting there? Not with why your golden child was cheating on his wife for months." My dad slammed his hand on the table, making the china rattle. "That is not the point." I stared at him. "That's exactly the point." Zach finally spoke. His voice was low, angry. "You had no right." I laughed once, bitterly. "No right. Claire is your wife. She came to me crying. She didn't even know who else to talk to. You could have told me in private. Not at dinner. Not like that. I tried to talk to you before." I shot back. "You ignored me. You always ignore me. You think I enjoy being the one who had to tell her? Watching her fall apart? I didn't ask for that." My mom's voice cracked. "You could have come to us first. Let us handle it. Like you handle everything else. By pretending it doesn't exist." She flinched. My dad's face turned an unhealthy shade of red. Zach looked like he wanted to punch a hole in the wall. "Owen," my mom said, tears forming again, "you're tearing this family apart." I looked at her for a long second, something inside me breaking loose. "No," I said. "Zach did that the second he decided to treat Claire like she was disposable. I just told the truth." My dad stood up. "Get out." "What?" "You heard me. You're not welcome here until you apologize." I laughed again, this time with less bitterness and more clarity. "Apologize for what?" "For not letting Zach bury his mistakes under another family dinner." "Leave," he said again, voice shaking with rage. So I left. I got in my car, drove back to my tiny one-bedroom apartment, and sat on the edge of my bed for hours. The adrenaline was gone now. All that was left was this gnawing ache in my chest. Grief, maybe. Grief for a family I'd never really had. For the illusion that maybe one day I'd be treated like an equal. That illusion was shattered now. Maybe it had been for years, and I just didn't want to see it. But here's the thing. The next few days, things didn't calm down. They got worse. Zach started damage control. He went on a campaign, telling family members I had hijacked Christmas to punish him for being more successful. He called me jealous, bitter, unstable, and it worked, at least on some people. Aunt Denise texted me a long message about healing and not airing dirty laundry, followed by a Bible verse. My cousin Riley just sent a yikes emoji. My own mom posted a passive-aggressive Facebook status about sons who think betrayal is love. But Claire? Claire started talking. She told her parents, her friends, and then, quietly, her lawyer. And me? I wasn't done yet. Because if Zach thought Christmas dinner was the end of it, he had no idea what was coming next. For the first time in years, I didn't go to my parents' house on Christmas morning. No passive-aggressive gift exchange. No pretending everything was fine. No playing along with Zach's curated Instagram-worthy version of the holidays. I woke up alone in my apartment, the winter light creeping through my blinds and painting long shadows across the floor. There was no tree in my living room. No wrapped gifts. Just a box of stale sugar cookies from the office holiday party and a silence that felt more honest than any family dinner I'd ever been to. I thought I'd feel triumphant after the mic drop at the restaurant. I thought I'd feel like I finally stood up for myself. But I didn't feel like a hero. I felt hollow and strangely exposed, like I'd peeled off a scab I'd been nursing for years only to find a wound that still wasn't healed. Over the next week, I barely left the apartment. I ate whatever I had in the fridge, which mostly consisted of half-eaten leftovers and expired hummus. I ghosted group chats, ignored texts, and avoided social media entirely, especially when I saw that Zach had posted a perfectly edited photo from Christmas Eve. No Claire in the shot, of course. Just him, mom, dad, and a caption that said, "Family first." Always. It was like I'd been erased in real time. Then came New Year's Eve. I didn't have plans. I never really did. Zach and his friends always threw some over-the-top party in a rented downtown penthouse with champagne fountains and a casual dress code that somehow still involved tuxedos. I used to go just to show face, to prove I wasn't hiding. But this year, I didn't even get the invite. Not even the obligatory pity text. Instead, I sat on my couch in sweatpants, watching bad TV and counting down the seconds to midnight alone. When the fireworks went off outside, I didn't celebrate. I just stood at my window and watched them bloom in the sky, thinking, maybe this is it. Maybe this is the year I stop waiting for their approval. It didn't happen all at once. There was no dramatic montage of me suddenly becoming successful or popular or happy. But little by little, I started to pull myself out of the pit. I cleaned my apartment from top to bottom on January 2nd. Not because it was messy, but because it felt like the only thing I could control. I tossed old clothes, boxed up things that reminded me of people who didn't care, and deleted numbers from my phone that only made me feel small. I unfollowed Zach on everything. Blocked him even. It felt petty, but it also felt necessary. Then I called Claire. She didn't answer right away, but she texted me back. Can I call you in an hour? When she did, her voice sounded clearer, stronger, like she'd been through a storm and was finally standing on the other side. Hey, she said. Hey. A pause. Then, you okay? Not really, I admitted. But getting there. She let out a soft laugh. Same. We talked for an hour. Then 2. She told me everything. How Zach tried to deny it, then tried to blame her, then tried to sweep it all under the rug. Classic. But she wasn't having it. She'd moved out of their condo and was staying with a friend for now. Her lawyer was good. She wasn't playing nice anymore. You were the only one who didn't treat me like a prop, she said at one point. Everyone else just saw me as Zach's accessory. You saw me. I always did, I said. And I meant it. That call changed something in me. It reminded me that sometimes telling the truth matters, even if it costs you everything. I started going back to work with a clearer head. I'm a graphic designer at a small but scrappy marketing firm. I've always loved what I do, even if I wasn't the loudest in the room. I'd been coasting for a while, too afraid to pitch big ideas or fight for better clients. But something about what happened lit a fire in me. I started speaking up more, taking ownership of projects, and it didn't go unnoticed. By February, I'd landed a lead role on a major branding campaign for a tech startup that was getting national attention. I stayed late at the office, but not because I was trying to prove anything. I just finally wanted to see what I could do when I stopped shrinking. One day, my boss called me into her office. I've been watching you lately, she said. Whatever's changed in you, it's working. You've got leadership in you, Owen. Ever think about going senior? I blinked. Seriously? Seriously. I left that meeting grinning like an idiot. But just as I started to climb, the shadows of my family found a way to creep back in. In March, my mom showed up at my apartment. No warning. No text. Just knocked on my door one Saturday afternoon like we hadn't gone 3 months without speaking. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity got the better of me. She stood there holding a foil-covered casserole dish, like she was auditioning for a Hallmark movie. Hi, sweetheart, she said softly. Can I come in? I stepped aside but said nothing. She sat on the edge of my couch like it might bite her. Her coat still on, purse in her lap. She looked smaller than I remembered. I've been thinking about you, she said after a long silence. We all have. Is that so? She winced. I know things got out of hand, but you didn't have to air all of that in front of everyone. It was cruel, Owen. I stared at her. Cruel as pretending nothing's wrong while your son cheats on his wife. Cruel as making me invisible at every family event. Cruel as kicking me out of the house for telling the truth. She swallowed. Zach is struggling. I'm not. That caught her off guard. She blinked. What do you mean? I mean I'm doing okay. Better than okay, actually. I'm not here to make you feel guilty. I just want you to know. I'm not playing that game anymore. She didn't speak for a long time. Then she nodded slowly, like she'd just realized something and didn't like it. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, she said. And that I miss you. I nodded. Thanks for saying that. She stood to leave. The casserole still sat untouched on the coffee table. Before she opened the door, she turned to me one last time. We're still your family, Owen. I gave her a small, tired smile. Maybe, but I'm not sure I'm still yours. She didn't reply, just left. That night, I called Claire again. She laughed when I told her about the casserole. You should have thrown it out the window, she said. I thought about it. We kept talking, not just that night, but often. Weekly at first, then almost every other day. We met up for coffee, then dinner, then a walk in the park that turned into 3 hours of wandering and talking about everything and nothing. We didn't rush anything. We didn't have to. She was rebuilding, just like me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had someone in my corner who truly saw me. Meanwhile, Zach's life was quietly falling apart. The divorce went public. Claire's lawyer was relentless. There were whispers in the family group chats, ones I wasn't in, but heard about anyway. Zach's perfect reputation? Cracking. His job? On shaky ground. Turns out some of those business trips overlapped with company funds. Claire had receipts. So did her lawyer. And through it all, I said nothing. I didn't need to. Because while Zach was desperately trying to control a crumbling narrative, I was writing a new one. A better one. For me. There's a very specific kind of satisfaction in watching someone unravel under the weight of their own choices. It doesn't require interference. No sabotage. Just silence and time. Zach had always been the type of guy who thrived on control. The loudest voice in the room, the center of attention, the one who steered the ship while the rest of us were expected to row. So when he started losing grip on the story he'd built for himself, perfect husband, successful businessman, golden son, he didn't handle it well. And I watched. Quietly. Carefully. But I didn't just sit back. Because while he scrambled to tape his image back together, I was building something. Something real. Something that couldn't be taken from me. Not with a smug smile or a sarcastic jab across the dinner table. Something I could finally call mine. It started small. Claire and I were sitting on the steps outside her friend's condo one rainy evening in April, sharing a cheap bottle of wine and wrapped in a blanket like two kids hiding from the world. The air smelled like wet pavement and lilac trees. We were talking about beginnings. How hers felt like an escape and mine felt like an overdue awakening. He never respected me, she said, swirling the wine in her cup. Not really. He loved the way I looked on paper. The way I fit into his life like a checklist item. Pretty wife. Great background. Polished smile. You're more than that, I said. She looked at me and smiled faintly. So are you. I didn't realize how badly I needed to hear that. We started talking about work, about design, and marketing, and how so many companies made terrible branding choices because they listened to people like Zach, guys who cared more about how things looked than how they felt. You've got good instincts, she said. If you ever wanted to go solo. I laughed. What? Like start my own firm? She shrugged. Why not? It was a ridiculous idea. I didn't have the money. I didn't have the connections. I barely had enough savings to cover 2 months of rent if something went wrong. But that night, something cracked open in me, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. By May, I'd sketched out a loose business plan. Nothing fancy, just a clean, minimal site offering freelance branding packages for small businesses. A name, a logo, some mock-up designs. Claire helped. She had a great eye and a knack for strategy. Her wedding planning background gave her a weirdly sharp understanding of client psychology, how to sell emotion without being manipulative. We worked on it in secret, late nights, weekends, sometimes over coffee, sometimes over takeout. And somewhere in the middle of all that, we started becoming something more. I don't know when it changed exactly. There was no moment, just a gradual leaning in, a touch on the arm that lingered too long, a glance that meant more than it said. But we didn't rush it. We couldn't. Not with everything still unfolding. Meanwhile, Zach was flailing. The company he worked for, an obnoxiously sleek firm that specialized in executive brand management, had caught wind of his divorce drama. Claire had receipts, photos, timelines, all of which had been submitted during discovery for the settlement, some of which had now made it to the inboxes of senior leadership. He was put on leave, pending internal review. That's when I got the call from my dad. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity got the better of me. Owen, he said, voice low and tense, we need to talk. I leaned back on my couch, eyeing the half-finished website on my laptop. About what? Your brother. Of course. There was a pause. He's going through a hard time. He's also going through a review for misappropriating company funds. Another pause. Claire didn't have to take it that far. She didn't, I said. She just stopped covering for him. He sighed. Families should protect each other. I bit back the urge to laugh. Funny. I don't remember being protected when you threw me out for telling the truth. That was a mistake, I said. Or exactly what you meant at the time. He didn't answer. Eventually, he said, We'd like you to come over. For dinner. No drama. Just family. I didn't say yes. But I didn't say no either. Because part of me knew this was it, the opening. The chance to finally step into the room not as a footnote or an afterthought, but as someone with leverage. The next few weeks were a blur. Claire and I officially launched the business. She came on as co-founder and brand strategist, though we kept her name off the public paperwork for now, just to avoid drawing Zach's attention too early. We called it Studio North, a quiet nod to the lake wind that always blew in off the shoreline, where we'd first started talking about building something. We got lucky. A mutual friend of Claire's ran a boutique hotel that needed a full rebrand. We pitched. We landed it. Then a cafe. Then a small app startup. Word spread. We weren't huge, but we were real. And growing. That's when Claire got the invitation. It was for Zach's 35th birthday. From his parents. A backyard gathering. Nothing fancy, the invite said. Just family and friends. Claire showed me the text. You going? She scoffed. Absolutely not. Then she looked at me. But you should. I raised an eyebrow. You think? She nodded slowly. This is the setup, Owen. This is where you walk in, and they see who you are now. Not who they told you to be. I mulled it over for a few days. Part of me didn't want to give them anything. Not even my presence. But another part of me knew she was right. If I wanted to close this chapter, not just burn the bridge but walk across it first, I needed to see it through. So I went. I showed up wearing a sharp navy blazer, clean boots, and confidence that wasn't forced. My hair was a little longer than my mom used to like. My beard a little thicker than Zach ever approved of. And I didn't care. The party was in full swing when I arrived. Folding tables with white tablecloths, string lights hanging across the backyard, catered sliders, and a rented margarita machine. Zach was working the crowd like a politician, shaking hands, laughing too loudly, pretending nothing was on fire behind his eyes. When he saw me, his smile faltered. Owen, he said, you made it. Wouldn't miss it, I replied, calm and smooth. My parents looked surprised. Pleasantly, maybe. My mom gave me a stiff hug. My dad clapped me on the back like nothing had ever happened. They didn't mention Christmas, or the fallout, or Claire. It was like they were trying to rewrite the past in real time. I didn't let them. I mingled. I was polite, but distant. I asked about their lives, but didn't offer much about mine. Until someone asked what I'd been working on lately. And I told them. Studio North. The clients. The launch. The name started floating from circle to circle. Someone's cousin had heard of us. Someone else asked for a card. That's when Zach realized what was happening. He cornered me by the drink table, fake smile plastered on his face. You're freelancing now? He asked, voice dipped in sugar. Not freelancing, I said. Running my own firm. His smile twitched. That's cute. We just landed a new campaign, I added casually. Actually, I think we pitched against your old firm for one of them. The twitch became a crack. You won. I sipped my drink. Wouldn't be mentioning it otherwise. He stared at me. What? You want a medal? I shrugged. Just wanted you to know I'm not where you left me. He looked like he wanted to say something cruel. Something that would knock me back down to size. But nothing came. Because the old tools didn't work on me anymore. I left before the cake. Said a few polite goodbyes. Watched my parents pretend not to notice when I didn't hug them. And I felt free. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Because while Zach was busy playing pretend, there was one more thread to pull. One more reveal he wasn't expecting. One more crack in his foundation I was ready to exploit. Something Claire had told me, just once, in passing, about a trust fund their parents had set up when they got married. Something Zach had used and abused. And something Claire still had access to. The perfect opportunity. The perfect leverage. The perfect ending. It's funny how revenge doesn't always look like a dramatic courtroom monologue or a sudden public takedown. Sometimes it's just a quiet paper trail. A clause buried in a document. A check with one signature too many. Zach always thought power came from loud rooms and louder voices. But I'd learned something else. Real power comes when no one sees you coming. Let me take you back a few months, shortly after Claire moved out. One night over dinner, she mentioned something curious about their finances. It wasn't a bitter rant, not even a complaint. More like a passing comment while she was scrolling through her phone, trying to track a tax document. You know, she said, when we got married, his parents set up this weird starter trust for us. Like a gift, but with strings. We couldn't touch it without both our signatures unless it was for a primary home, a business, or kid stuff. Wait, I said, pausing mid-bite. You had a joint trust account? Yeah, about 75 grand. His dad structured it through some financial firm in Naperville. We used part of it for the down payment on the condo, but I swear Zach pulled more later. Said it was for renovations. Never saw a receipt. I leaned in. Did you ever authorize the withdrawal? She looked at me, her brow furrowing. No. I thought he was pulling from his own investment account. I stared at her. Claire, if he took money from that trust without both signatures, that's fraud. Her eyes widened slowly. A week later, Claire's lawyer filed a formal request for financial discovery on the trust account. 3 weeks after that, the documents came back. Zach had pulled $21,300 from the trust under the guise of a joint renovation project for their condo, except there had been no project. No invoices. No receipts. Just a few odd transfers. A few Venmo payments. One particularly damning one labeled Maddie, deposit from Miami. We had him. Now, here's where it got interesting. Claire's lawyer didn't immediately move to press charges. No, that would have caused noise, and Zach would have seen it coming. Instead, she filed a motion to freeze the trust account while the divorce settlement was pending. She cited potential misappropriation of marital funds and breach of contract under the trust agreement's original clause, which clearly required dual authorization for non-primary expenses. Zach, as expected, had no idea this was happening. His legal team didn't flag the freeze until Claire's lawyer had already submitted the documentation to the estate trustee, who then reached out to my parents. Why? Because it was their trust, their money, their legal liability. That's when things started to unravel, fast. My parents called a meeting. Not a brunch this time. A real meeting. One that included their lawyer, the estate trustee, Zach, and a very cool, collected Claire. And me. I wasn't originally supposed to be there. But Claire insisted. I want someone in that room who won't be intimidated by their family theatrics, she said. And who knows what Zach is really like when the mask slips. So there I was, sitting across from my parents in a conference room with big windows and bigger egos. My mom looked like she'd aged a decade. My dad had that stiff, jaw-clenched expression he used to wear when we ran out of options. Zach looked like a man who had just realized the game was no longer being played on his terms. The trustee opened the meeting. After reviewing the documents, it's clear that a withdrawal was made in violation of the trust's co-signature requirement. Claire Bennett did not authorize the disbursement of $21,300. Mr. Zachary Bennett submitted forged documentation to override the co-ownership clause. Claire sat motionless, her fingers laced over a leather-bound folder. She didn't gloat. She didn't even smile. She let the silence do the work. Zach stammered. I didn't. It was a mistake. I thought You submitted a falsified signature. The trustee interrupted. A crime. One with financial and potentially criminal repercussions. My dad cleared his throat, looking at Zach like he could still fix this. We're all family here. Surely we can resolve this without escalating. Claire finally spoke. Her voice was calm, even. I'm not pressing charges. I don't want this to go to court. I just want my half of the trust returned. With interest. And full release of claim on the condo. I keep it. He walks away clean. That's the deal. Zach's face twisted. That's my condo. It was bought with marital funds. It's half mine. Unless you'd prefer we drag the trust issue into civil court and let the judge decide what else you've been hiding. Silence. Claire continued. You took the money, Zach. You lied. You forged my name. And now you're going to walk away with nothing. Or you're going to walk into a courtroom with everything. The room stayed silent for a full 10 seconds. Then Zach slumped back in his chair, defeated. I'll sign. The trustee nodded. Then we'll begin the transfer of assets immediately. My mom looked like she was going to cry. My dad was staring at the ceiling. Zach couldn't even look at me. But I looked at him, and I didn't say a word. After the meeting, Claire and I walked to the parking lot together. The air smelled like spring rain and something new. Something clean. You okay? I asked. She nodded. I'm better than okay. We stood there for a moment. Not speaking. Just standing. Then she turned to me and smiled. You know, if you had told me a year ago I'd be free, with a new business, and you by my side, I wouldn't have believed it. I smiled back. If you had told me I'd finally get to say everything I needed to say without being shut down or laughed at, I wouldn't have believed it either. We didn't rush. We didn't move in together right away. But over the next few months, we did everything else together. Built campaigns. traveled for work, laughed more than I thought possible. She didn't fix me. I didn't rescue her. We just saw each other. Clearly. Finally. As for my family, I didn't go to Thanksgiving that year. Or Christmas. When they asked why, I told them the truth. I'm building something better, I said. And it doesn't have room for people who only show up when they need something. Zach. He moved to Austin. Tried to rebrand himself as a consultant. Last I heard, he was pitching digital marketing strategies to mid-level tech startups and charging way too much for advice he Googled the night before. He still hasn't paid back the trust, but Claire's lawyer has that under control. There's always another clause. My parents never really apologized. Not in words. But over time, the silence became its own kind of apology. And eventually, I stopped needing it. Studio North grew. We hired 2 designers. Got featured in a regional business journal. Claire's new last name, changed quietly and without ceremony, was listed next to mine on the website's About page. Co-founders, partners, equals. And me? I finally stopped shrinking. I finally stopped explaining. I finally stopped waiting for their table to have a seat for me. Because I built my own. And when I looked around, I realized something that still makes me smile to this day. Every person at my table wants me there. Every single one.